Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? In the 80s and 90s, Apple's computers mostly looked like boring, beige boxes. But at the turn of the millennium, the company tried something very different. In late 1997, Apple released its PowerMac G3 line of desktops. These brought dramatically improved performance to the Mac platform, but otherwise weren't very exciting. In fact, they reused prior Mac's case designs, save for the all-in-one model, which was only sold to the education market. But the company would soon turn heads with an all-new and admittedly risky industrial design. The iMac debuted in May 1998, and its colorful, translucent plastic looked nothing like the computers the company, or any of its competitors, had produced before. Apple's gamble paid off, as the machine was a hit and brought new life to the previously struggling computer maker. And in January 1999, it was the PowerMac's turn for a refresh. The so-called blue and white G3 was radically different from its predecessor in several ways. First and most obviously, it had taken on the same styling cues as the iMac, translucent side panels sandwiching vibrant blue pinstriped plastic. The curved handles practically invited owners to pick it up and carry it around, and overall, its design suggested that it should be kept on top of one's desk and shown off, instead of hidden underneath it. But the machine differed in more than just cosmetics. It was supremely serviceable. Just pull the latch on the right side and the entire panel hinged down to reveal the internal components. The motherboard was mounted to that panel, giving easy access to the RAM and expansion card slots. Hard drives went in the bottom of the chassis, which helped keep cabling tidy. By unclipping the front bezel, one could also remove the metal cage for optical drive upgrades, or installing something like a zip drive. The blue and white G3 also followed in the iMac's footsteps by eliminating a built-in floppy drive and streamlining its external interface options. Gone were the serial and SCSI ports of the beige era, replaced by pairs of USB and FireWire connectors. This was the first appearance of FireWire on a Mac, and it promised plug-and-play simplicity, much more user-friendly than the voodoo sometimes needed to sort out SCSI peripherals and their complexities with bus IDs and termination. The machine included 10100 Ethernet on board and also offered a connector for an optional 56K modem. If one had a serial device they needed to connect, USB to serial adapters had started to become common, and a couple of companies developed serial port modules that could be installed in place of that modem. Only one legacy Mac port remained, and really just for a specific set of users. A lone ADB connector allowed those who already had a graphics tablet to easily keep using it, but more importantly, it accommodated those who used software that required a licensed dongle, like the Quark Express page layout package. Sure, one could have used a USB to ADB adapter like the Griffin iMate, but that would have taken up one of the two USB ports, or forced owners into buying a USB hub, if they hadn't already. Of course, one could plug in an ADB keyboard and mouse if they preferred, and some blue and white owners certainly did. The machine shipped with the same compact USB keyboard and mouse as the iMac. This particular G3 included these, and they needed a serious cleaning, just like the rest of the machine. These peripherals produced a very polarizing reaction. Some were fine with them, while others hated them. The lack of special keys and smaller than usual arrow keys drew the most complaints, but the overall key feel wasn't that great either. The mouse was even worse. Its round shape made it not very ergonomic and also easy to grab the wrong way if you weren't paying attention. The G3 itself drew criticism from some who thought it should look more professional. They argued that the machines would stick out in an office environment, and that certainly was true, and intentional. After years of producing machines that blended in, Apple wanted the G3 to get some attention. And thankfully for them, most of the attention was positive. People loved the ease of upgrades, of course, but the overall performance was also much improved. The machine was initially offered with PowerPC G3 CPUs clocked at 300, 350, and 400 MHz, and all used standard PC100 RAM modules. Graphics were handled by an ATI Rage 128 with 16 MB of video memory, and because it came in the form of a PCI card, one could swap it out for something better later on. Otherwise, there were 3 additional PCI slots for further expansion. A SCSI card was the most popular option, and Apple even shipped a high-end configuration of the G3 that included one. But this base model 300 MHz machine never got that upgrade. In fact, it got hardly any upgrades, which is somewhat uncommon for these. Its base 64 MB of RAM was bumped up with an additional 128 MB module, but otherwise, it still has its original 6 GB IDE hard drive and CD-ROM. Some owners got serious life out of these machines, primarily because of their socketed CPUs. As with other Mac models, third parties produced CPU upgrade cards, but one didn't necessarily even need to go that far to get improved performance. These models of G3 processors were found to be amenable to overclocking, and Apple made doing so inadvertently easy. A set of jumpers controlled the CPU multiplier, and getting an extra 50 MHz was practically guaranteed, with some users able to eke 100. Doing so voided one's warranty, of course, but if you pulled it off, the cost savings were significant. The base model 300 MHz machine sold for $1,600 US, with the 350 MHz version priced at $2,000 and the top-end 400 MHz G3 commanding $3,000. After a few months, Apple revised the blue and white by bumping all the models up by 50 MHz, but also fixing some bugs and limitations in the process. The biggest of which was related to the IDE bus. Due to the controller chip used, the first revision blue and whites were limited to a single hard drive on the primary channel. Clever owners thought they could drop an additional drive into the bay where the optional zip would be installed, but it turned out that some machines couldn't boot from a hard disk on that bus. Furthermore, drives that used the UDMA command set caused stability problems, meaning that only a limited selection of them from that time could be used in the system. All of these problems were fixed with the Revision 2 motherboard, which is probably easiest identified by this chip. If it shows part number PCI 646U2, then it's an older revision and should be avoided if you can. But in terms of longevity, both of them have held up well over time. Apple used tantalum capacitors on the motherboards, and their clock or PRAM batteries generally aren't quite old enough yet where leakage is a concern. Though that didn't keep me from pulling the battery out of my unit when I got it, just to be safe. Other than the occasional power supply failure, which can happen to all retro computers, the blue and white G3 should prove to be a low-risk way to get into older Macs. And if you do fancy picking one up, keep an eye out for a matching monitor. Apple produced 3 models in its Studio Display line that naturally followed the G3's design. A 21-inch with a Sony Trinitron CRT that sold for $1,500, a 15-inch LCD for $1,000 that's since become desirable among retro Mac collectors, and the most common model, a 17-inch CRT with a Mitsubishi Diamondtron tube that went for a more palatable $500. That one offered solid image quality, but otherwise its list of features is pretty short, save for an interesting stand that allowed one to stash the keyboard underneath when not in use. And that is, of course, if you can find one that works. These monitors proved to not have the best reliability record, and while this particular one does still function, it occasionally makes a snapping sound from its flyback transformer, suggesting it's not in the best of shape. The upside is that, unlike beige plastic, the translucent polycarbonate does seem to hold up well over time. There's a couple of small cracks in the handles of the G3, but I suspect that's more from rough handling than from age. The blue and white G3 can run early versions of macOS 10, but it shipped with OS 8.5, and that's probably where it performs its best. The Rage 128 graphics were actually pretty good for the time, and these machines are well suited for classic Mac gaming. Yes, that's a thing, and it was a bigger scene than you might have expected. Otherwise, they're solid options for tinkering around and experiencing Apple's translucent era. And what an era that was. One of rapid change, not just for Apple, but for the computer industry as a whole. The blue and white G3 represented a major challenge to the beige status quo of most professional PCs. It dared to introduce a sense of whimsy to an otherwise boring market segment. But perhaps most importantly, it managed to strike the perfect balance between form and function. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on social media at thisdoesnotcomp, and as always, thanks for watching.